Hi guys, my name is Adam and I am currently a researcher full-time at the TSG Research Lab here in Heidelberg, Germany. I'm originally from Australia and over the past 4 years I have flown overseas to do my PhD full-time over here. And after my PhD I took on a full-time position which I've been uh, in at the moment for 1 year now at the TSG Research Lab. And throughout this time, I have quite a lot of experience of how it is to be overseas and to be a sports scientist and to really throw yourself into the deep end of moving over to Europe from your home country across the world. And today, Chris has asked me to give you guys a bit of a brief introduction of the pros and cons of moving overseas and some of the things maybe you guys haven't thought about when trying to decide whether you would make the move or not. And I hope that this presentation can give you guys a little bit of an explanation and help you kind of swing either way on the decisions. So I've made a small presentation for you guys today, and I will be giving only 6 pros and 6 cons, so it'll be quite short and sweet. All right. So today we're going to be, again, talking about the pros and cons of moving overseas, and you guys can find these links at either Instagram or Twitter or on YouTube. So over the last 4.5 years, I have been living overseas. Originally, I moved to a place called Saarbrücken in Germany, which is on the west coast. And then over the last year and a half, I've moved to a beautiful city called Heidelberg in Germany. It's very famous for its tourism. And I think that's the main point of point one, which is when you are living overseas, you feel like you're a tourist in your own life again. You get to explore new cities, and especially the city that you moved to, you could actually become a full-time tourist within itself because every time you go out for eat, every time you go to a park or you visit the city just down the road, you're basically acting as if you are a tourist, and it's really interesting to be able to explore a city that you've moved to with such a new, fresh set of eyes, and you're very always eager to get out and explore new things, and you become quite interested again in your own city and where you're living. So that's point number one. Point two is that, of course, this is the most famous one, is that you get to travel to different countries or cities more easily, especially if you go to Europe. It's the very famous weekend trips to I don't know, Croatia or Greece, or you have a weekend in Paris because it's just a 2 hour train trip, or it was a 2 hour train trip for me. And I really love these things because it was such an easy way to inspire yourself to work hard throughout the week and then travel on the weekends. And this was something that I wasn't able to experience in Australia, being that everything within an 8 hour 8 hour distances all looks the same. But if you travel 8 hours in Europe, you're crossing 4 countries possibly. And so this was really exciting for me, and I'm sure that this is one of the biggest reasons why people also want to move to Europe as well. And I can definitely preach that this is something that I will always treasure, my experiences of the short trips to different European cities. The third positive is that growth and comfort doesn't coexist. This is my one of my famous quotes that I really held on to while making the decision to move overseas. This is from Ginny Rometty, which was the former CEO of IBM, and this was something that really struck home when moving overseas, is that in order to grow, you have to be uncomfortable, and you have to be comfortable being uncomfortable. And you can only really understand that when you're in a different country and you every single day you get put in a new position where you can be quite uncomfortable. You don't know the roads. If you're driving, maybe you're driving on the other side of the road, for instance. Maybe you don't even have a car at all. So there's many layers of what someone says is comfortable, uncomfortable. Maybe you're eating different food types. You're speaking a different language to other people. And so this is something that you have to be comfortable with, always going outside of your comfort zone. And really, I feel like when people are living in their own city and they know everyone, they know the restaurants around, they know where to order. If they need something, they know where the post office is, they know where the train station is, they never have to ask anybody for help. This is not the same when you completely throw yourself in the deep end and you move to a completely new city or country where none of those things, or you have no experience with any of that. And that was something that was a big positive for me, because after the end these 4 years, I definitely know that if I moved back to Australia, it would be like playing life on easy mode. So I've definitely grown as a person as because of this. The fourth positive is that being a native English speaker is a huge advantage in many countries, especially in Europe. And this, in my experience, has been one of the biggest advantages that I can bring to the table when it comes to job opportunities or opportunities in general, to get myself more active in the professional community. So I can definitely say that having strong English, both speaking and writing, has helped me professionally, whether it's lecturing or presenting at conferences on behalf of our team, who maybe other people are not necessarily so confident in English. They really rely on native English speakers in order to help them. And if you're that person, which comes naturally to us speaking English, this is definitely something that you can take advantage over here. Especially, I found that there's definitely a big trend for universities over in Europe to have more international courses for university students, and definitely having that native English aspect to your resume is a huge win and very sought after commodity here in Europe. The fifth pro that I would say is that you get to learn about other cultures. So definitely staying in Australia, where we have our own culture within its own right. I wasn't really sure what different cultures were like outside of what I was experiencing in Australia. And there was a lot of things that kind of shocked me at first, but it was only shocking because I didn't actually understand the culture. So, for instance, when it comes to manners in general, so we always think of this concept of saying please or no thank you, and those are very common principles. But for instance, in the Danish language, there is no word for please. So maybe a person who is speaking Danish, or who is from Denmark and will speak English, will forget to say please a lot because it's not necessarily common for them. And this also shocked me in Germany, which is it's a very strong cultural thing to say no very abruptly, and we're not really used to that in kind of like the Australian or the British way of saying no. Is we politely dance around the around wanting to say no, so we say, oh, I'm not really sure about that, or maybe I'll follow up, or I'll text you. And this is not really the case in Germany. They don't understand why you would say anything other than no, because it's a very clear expression of your answer. Uh, Another thing that I got to learn about was there was definitely some sort of benefit of problem solving that was kind of uh, unfamiliar with me in Australia, which was what happens if a player comes to visit your club and you don't speak the language of each other. And so we have many people who come over and speak French from France to Germany. We don't have a single French-speaking staff at the club, and so this is always very interesting about how you overcome this. But if you do overcome this also relates to the problem three, which is, or the positive three, which is growth and comfort doesn't coexist. And so if you can overcome the problem, then you can grow as a sports scientist and problem solver. The sixth thing is that many countries provide free tuition, and it is often joked with me and my friends about how I have so much student debt, and it's kind of something that Europeans are a little bit uncomfortable with as to why we, as at such a young age, would pay for tuition, or why would we even be in so much debt at a young age in the first place. They don't really understand it. I'm happy they don't understand it because it's something that they don't have to experience themselves. But definitely a huge positive is if you're not looking for a $40,000 to $80,000 debt, maybe moving over to Europe might be something that you would consider. But with every positive, there's also an equal negative, and there's definitely lots of negatives about moving overseas. And the first one is that it can be very expensive. Now, I know that was contrary to the point I just last made, but it's expensive in a different reason. Is because, for instance, if you normally had a part-time job in your own country, that might not actually be possible when you first move overseas, because first of all, you don't speak the language, and you definitely need some sort of basic language ability, like a two, like a 2A or like a 2B or something. So there's different level language classes that you need to work different part-time jobs. And if you don't have that, then you probably can't necessarily get a part-time job. So your weekly salary will most likely decrease. Also, if you want to be flying home and seeing your family, that's also very expensive. So if I took every 6 months a flight home just to see my family, that's a flight from Europe to Australia and back twice a year. So again, that's also very expensive, and it can add up over time as well. The second problem is that there's a huge language barrier. And this language barrier in the past and still to this day can make me feel isolated. It increases my anxiety tenfold. And it's because this language barrier makes daily tasks more difficult. So I never really understood the problem of taking a bus or ordering food or trying to just get the daily groceries or find the directions to the train station. This was so easy in my own country, but it's actually extremely difficult task in a different city, especially when you're asking people who don't speak the same language as you. And often these people can, if they don't speak your language, it's very, very, confusing. You can almost feel gutted because you put yourself out there, and all of these things can really, push you down when you're already going through a hard time, especially if you're missing your family or something. And it also makes you less independent. So I would say, quite an independent person back in the day, and now I rely on people for everything. So if I have to go to the citizenship, the foreigner office, in order for my visas and stuff, I always have to bring somebody to help me, and I always rely on someone else to help me, especially when I don't speak the language to the degree that I need to. And I always joke about my friends that I can get a PhD in English, but I struggle still to this day to order a food or a bus ticket in German. And I always say, like, I promise I'm not this stupid in English, that you really do sometimes feel stupid in a different language just because you can't explain or express how you truly feel, and that can be really frustrating. The third thing is not seeing a family for extended periods of time. So I briefly touched on this before, but this is something that, especially with the COVID, has really made me realize how far away I am from home a lot. And I put this picture on here is because, for instance, if you have a holiday time, these are often the worst times where you really feel that distance. And I can definitely say that it does not feel nice to be the person on the computer watching all of your family together unwrapping presents from afar. That's going to be very difficult for you guys to handle. And maybe if you have, one time or two times and you already have a defined date that you can return home, then that's definitely maybe a little bit more manageable. But for me, I don't have a predefined data, so when I'm going to go home to Australia. And so this really makes me feel like the world is 10 times farther away from my family, and especially over the holiday periods. The fourth negative problem is that there's unforeseen problems that you can't really experience on these web searches of trying to find whether you should move to Germany or not. So an example that I didn't really understand, which is quite an adult problem that I've encountered, is that living in a different country is you're also paying tax in that country. So I, at the moment, am paying tax in Germany, and this also contributes to my retirement funds in a different country. But I know I don't think I will retire in Germany, so I kind of feel this, a little bit a waste of money that I'm spending lots of my income, especially in a high tax land like Germany, paying for my retirement, which I will most likely never see in the future. And yes, this is an adult problem, and yes, this is a future problem that I will have in 50 years, but it is still a problem. And I think, especially if you're considering multiple years working overseas, then this is something that will be significant over time. The fifth one is that this is also a kind of a positive and a negative, but depends how you look at it. But I'm making a lot of connections overseas. Going to lots of conferences, lots of business networks, lots of emails within Europe. But I'm not necessarily connecting a lot with the people in my home country of Australia anymore. I've kind of stopped. There's many reasons for that. Time zones is difficult. Often, because I'm working overseas in Europe, that I'm connecting a lot with people in Europe and not so much with people overseas. But that is a bit of a problem because Chris said the other day in one of his videos is that it's not really what you know for a job. It's more who you know and then who those people know as well. And that's really about how you can get a job in sports science with such a difficult industry to get a job. And if you're making connections in kind of the area where you're not going to be long term, then you're kind of maybe missing an opportunity cost to really hammer in some of those connections, that you might need in the future, and you're not necessarily wasting it, but you have to really consider what you're going to think or do long term, and whether this is the right opportunity for you to be connecting with these people, or is it kind of this kind of false hope that you most likely will never work in the Netherlands? So why should you be really putting effort into speak to people in the Netherlands, such, in their universities and stuff. The sixth con is that just because you're overseas doesn't always make it a holiday. Lots of people kind of get confused, and they have this dream about moving overseas, and they'll, every weekend they'll travel to a new country or a new city or try this and differently. And that's really not the case. I mean, at least I tried my best to go to different countries or different cities a lot, and I still do to some extent. But at the end of the day, you still have to do your laundry and do all the chores, and your weekend is largely built on routine. And some days you're not going to want to travel, and you have to be responsible and do all of these different things, and maybe you have to do a little bit more side studies, so you can't necessarily go for holidays all the time. And so you really have to be careful with convincing yourself that it's not necessarily this dream world of every day is a holiday in Europe. That you do actually have to continue to live your adult life in a responsible manner, take out the trash, all of these different things, do the laundry, and those things take time, and those things can sometimes chew up those cool weekends that you had planned. But I thought it was worth mentioning because this is sometimes the reality catches up, and it's not necessarily all fun, and and all that glitters is not always gold over here. But that's the last con. So my personal opinion, moving over here and experiencing all that I have in Europe and working with the highest level of football over here in Europe, I would definitely say that the pros outweigh the cons. I will always recommend people to move overseas. I've had amazing times, I've had terrible times, but I'd say at the end of the day, I would honestly say that everyone has different experiences and a different background and strengths and weaknesses. And in order to really find out whether it was a good decision, you kind of have to do it. And I would rather come over here and live the life that I did, and regret a few things than stay in Australia and always wish, that whole what if I moved. So sometimes I would say just do it and you'll find the rest out if you do it, and try not to Google everything too much, because at the end of the day, the best way to learn is just to do it and put yourself in the deep end. So if you guys have any questions, you guys can see me on Twitter or message Chris, and I'm sure we'll be able to help talk about, if you guys are looking or exploring to find stuff overseas, then maybe we can help out and give you guys some advice as to how we did it as well. So thank you for your time. I appreciate it. And I hope that you guys have learned something from this. Thank you.